His Majesty's opposition fully supports the provision of depleted uranium munitions to Ukraine by the government.
The use of this ammunition is likely to cause chemical toxicity.
Depleted uranium shells cause birth defects in infants.
My Lords, I declare my interest as a serving Army Reservist. Given the lack of tangible evidence to the contrary, we do not recognise the presupposed potential health risk to the health or the environment. The UK notes that environmental and long-term health effects of the use of depleted uranium munitions have been thoroughly investigated by the World Health Organization, the United Nations Environmental Programme, the International Atomic Energy Agency, NATO, the Centres for Disease Control, the European Commission and others, none of which has documented the long-term environmental or health effects.
My Lords, for those of us who are students of history, the present time seems very much like 1913. Every few weeks there's a ratcheting up of confrontation. No one has any apparent desire to end this and seek peace. There are health hazards involved and the UN has looked at them. I ask the Minister, is he morally happy that we are now supplying depleted uranium shells to Ukraine when will we begin a serious search for peace?
Well, my Lords, I can say, hand on heart, I am morally very comfortable that we are providing these armour-piercing rounds to Ukrainian forces so that they can push back Putin's illegal invasion.
Would the noble Minister agree that whatever legitimate concerns people may have at the health and environmental impact of uranium-depleted shells, which I personally would share, that President Putin's claim that he's looking to store tactical nuclear missiles in Belarus because the West is collectively already beginning to use weapons with a nuclear component is utterly bogus? Given that British forces have been using these armour-piercing shells legally for several decades in accordance with Article 36 of the 1977 Protocol additional to the Geneva Conventions.
I completely agree with the Right Reverend Prelate.
Could I just ask the Noble Lord the Minister if he would go back and talk to his colleagues about the great care that needs to be taken in answering questions on issues of this sort from the Foreign and Commonwealth Office and from the Ministry of Defence.
Well, I thank the Noble Lord for his comments and I shall definitely do so.
My Lords, the Minister mentioned the United Nations but did not take account of the United Nations report which says the use of this ammunition is likely to cause chemical toxicity, which can result in skin irritation and kidney failure. Is he aware of that report? And the other point is this: have we not handed Mr. Putin an ill-founded but successful propaganda opportunity, claiming falsely that the Allies are seeking to introduce a nuclear element to the conflict? Who authorised the use or indeed, who authorised the supply of this ammunition? And who took account of the possible public responses which people like Mr. Putin might take advantage of?
Yeah, that's the point.
My Lords, let me reiterate, multiple scientific bodies, including the UN, have concluded and studied at length there are no minimal risks of long-term health effects from exposure to DU. On the point of Putin's posturing, he is simply trying to deter our support for the forces of Ukraine. It is fundamental that we supply Ukrainian forces with these rounds due to their armour-piercing capabilities so that they can engage Russian adversaries from further distances.
I I've read reports that depleted uranium shells cause birth defects in infants. The very thought, even the uncertainty, is such that it will lower the moral standing of both the UK and Ukraine to use them, and, as has been said, give a very effective weapon to Vladimir Putin to escalate conflict. This is something, surely, that is not desired.
My Lords, in terms of escalation, it needs to be, I think, reiterated that Putin signalled his intention to station tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus as early as June 2022. So he's been playing this game for a long time, and he's simply trying to capitalise on the supply of these munitions to our Ukrainian allies.
Is the Minister aware? He mentioned a number of organisations that concluded that these weapons were safe. But is he aware that the Royal Society carried out a report and they concluded that any impact on personal health and the environment is very low, in their words? And would you also agree that it's incredibly hypocritical of the Kremlin to criticise this supply of weapons when they have been using depleted uranium shells from the start of the war?
Well, my noble friend raises several excellent points, all of which I agree with.
We say to the noble Lord the Minister, because it's important to continually restate our unity of purpose in this chamber. His Majesty's opposition fully supports the provision of depleted uranium munitions to Ukraine by the government. And the crucial point today, isn't it, to say to President Putin, you will not get a propaganda coup from this. To reiterate, the important point to make is these are, despite the word uranium, conventional weapons used in many conflicts. So isn't the task for us all to prevent, as I say, a cynical use of Western fears by Putin to justify placing tactical nuclear warheads in Belarus?
I personally thank the noble Lord opposite and the support from His Majesty's loyal opposition and the whole House in our continued resolute support for Ukraine. He is absolutely correct. This is nothing but Putin's brinkmanship. He could end this war tomorrow by ceasefiring and withdrawing his troops from Ukraine immediately.
Isn't it important that we keep a sense of proportion here? People in Ukraine are being blown to smithereens by Putin's missiles, and there may be arguments about the health effects of these weapons, but it is as nothing compared to what the Ukrainians are being. And that is why it is so important that we continue to support them in every way we can to defeat this tyrant and his dreadful behaviour.
I would like to thank my noble friend for that support. He is entirely right. The major threat to life and the environment and the way of life of the people of Ukraine is coming from the shelling and merciless bombardment from Russia's forces, and this must end immediately.
When Putin is eventually dragged in front of the ICC.
My Lords, the positioning of Russian short and intermediate range nuclear missiles in Belarus offers Russia no advantage whatsoever beyond what it already achieves from its current basing arrangements. But what it does do is demonstrate, since it is contrary to the Belarusian constitution, that that particular country, under its present leadership, has become a wholly Russian subsidized and Russian-dominated puppet state, completely contrary to the wishes of a great many of its people. So in all of this, will the UK government undertake to do all that it can to support the Belarusian people in their resistance to their oppressive regime?
The and gallant Lord makes a very important point, and we condemn the Lukashenko government's provision of support to Putin's unprovoked and illegal war in Ukraine. We are very concerned about the recent passage of constitutional amendments in Belarus that enable it to renounce its nuclear-free status and their recent decision to host Russian nuclear weapons on their territory.
Well, when Putin is eventually dragged in front of the ICC, can we also add to the charge sheet the illegal munitions he used against the people of Syria?
My noble friend is absolutely right, and this is definitely something that should be considered.
think, my Lords, I think we should be very grateful for the intervention from the front bench opposite, and strongly reinforce what my noble friend Lord Forsyth said about losing all sense of proportion. The proposition, absurd proposition, when this is a very widely used uranium-depleted metal and very little to do with nuclear power, the absurd proposition is that being killed by one of these shells might cause skin irritation, whereas being killed by a shell without it, you'll just be dead. That seems to be the proposition. Can we please keep a sense of proportion in this chamber about these matters? Because at the moment we seem to be losing it.
My noble friend is absolutely correct. Let me reiterate. DU armour-piercing rounds are effective, they are legal, they are fully compliant with the law of armed conflict, and extensive research and tests have shown them to be safe to those operating these munitions.
That concludes oral questions for today.